you believe that you deserve it, right? You have no worth, you have no value. It's been whittled away, and that's what the abuse process does, is it takes away any kind of worth that you have, any kind of confidence that you have about who you are.
Everything you do from then on is different.
One of the detectives, I think his name was
He was
Derek.
a golden boy.
And all we can do right now is come together.
Extreme domestic violence, multiple rapes.
So glad to have you with us on life support, and we've got a great guest with us today that is going to cover a whole gamut of issues, including her own story, which is compelling. It's a story of redemption, but it's also a story that shines the light on a lot of darkness. And I would say to you right now that some of the things we're going to talk about are difficult, but they may be exactly what you're experiencing, or others that you walk alongside of are experiencing. And so I just pray today that God would shine a light and expose darkness and help us learn tools about how to deal with it. So Lynda Koehler is here. Hi, Lynda. How are you?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she has quite a story of her own. And so she's come here with an incredibly transparent heart and a story that glorifies Christ. And, you know, I guess the thing that caught my eye as I read through some of the elements of your story is that you've been married 4 times. And that's not, I guess, in the church world. That probably raises some eyebrows. So
to say the least.
So tell me about that.
Yeah, so, I was married the first time. All of my marriages have had elements of just extreme dysfunction, and it's difficult to talk about. But the first time I was married, I was pretty young, and married to I was Catholic, grew up Catholic, and married to a guy who we dated for 5 years before that. And when we got married, it was like a light bulb went off about his behavior. Just became very inconsistent with anything I had recognized. So very controlling. Wanted me to kind of quit my job, stay home, make babies, not work. That's not what I wanted for my life, and started following me and doing all sorts of strange things. So I ended that marriage pretty quickly. My second marriage was more of a 20-some year relationship marriage. And that marriage was very defining for me. So having come out of a home that was abusive, where I witnessed and had abuse actually happen to me of pretty much every variety in my family of origin, the behaviors in that marriage were very familiar to me. So the things that happened in that marriage and why I stayed so long was, I was 20 years old and didn't want to have 2 divorces behind me. And so I said, well, I'm a Catholic. You cannot get divorced. You have to stay married. My parents had a very bad marriage, lots of abuse between them, and never did they talk about divorce. So it was modeled to me that you stay once you're married. So my marriage to my second husband included, started out, very loving, very sort of traditional, and quickly moved into something that was very dark.
Tell me about that. What does darkness look like? And you're talking about a marriage where it would be in the church kind of marriage, right?
Yes.
Not out there on the fringes.
Yeah, not on the fringes. So this marriage was, I was very quickly introduced to pornography after we got married. And it was, hey, let's just do porn together as a way to enhance our sexual experience. And that felt very uncomfortable to me. And so when I started saying no, the behavior on my part just exited and said, I'm not going to do that with you anymore. That doesn't feel right. It feels like you're cheating on me, basically, with someone else. And he, at that point, chose to covertly turn that into something that he did behind my back. And so lots of things happened. I mean, we had magazines at the time because that was a long time ago, right? So, magazines that were hidden all over the house, that were hidden in his car, things like that. And quickly over time, that emerged into a full-blown sexual addiction, where he escalated his behavior, and all of a sudden, magazines weren't enough. It became it became more interesting to make 1-800 calls and talk to people, that way, buy time with people that could provide that kind of stimulant to him. This went on for several years. We were in a cycle of me catching him confessing because he was caught, me saying, you've got to do something about this. This isn't okay with me anymore. And ultimately, it got to a point where he agreed to enter inpatient therapy at Golden Valley Healthcare Center at the time. Long time ago, it's not there anymore, but under a different name. And went into treatment for sexual addiction, which I was a part of as a spouse, and was one of the people that didn't make it through the program. So he checked all the boxes, but nothing really changed his heart. And so, being young, I was very excited. Yay, yay, yay. He's all better. And the cycle started repeating again and got to a point where, he was going to counseling, Christian counseling. Went to some excellent Christian counselors in the Twin Cities. Mark Laser, who recently passed away, but is kind of the father of Christian sexual addiction therapy. So had a great experience there, but still did not have a heart change. And by this time, I was probably around 28 years old or so, and decided, well, let's have babies, because that'll fix him. I'll just have babies, and I have to have something to do because my husband doesn't want me. So what a great idea, right? So couldn't get pregnant, had really some terrible infertility experiences, had some problems on his side, and so ended up buying sperm, and found out through that process, that's a little bit graphic, but found out through that process that his sperm would not move inside my body, but donor sperm actually would. And so in hindsight, I believe that was God's way of saying, we're not going to pass the genetics of this on to you. And he was protecting me in that moment. So I lost my first baby, which was very painful. I had nobody there with me. He certainly was not a source of comfort. And finally gave birth to two, and he was really never a part of their lives or the process. And he had an opportunity to move to France, to Paris for work, when the kids were very, very little. I mean, under 4 or 5 years old was my oldest. And so we moved to France. I quit my career. My career had been progressing pretty rapidly. At the time, I was a managing director at a very large company, and for being 28 years old, I had my MBA. I was quickly kind of rising, so I quit my career and I said, "Let's go to France. Let's move to Paris. It'll change my marriage, save our marriage. Everything will be better." The babies didn't work, but I'm sure this will work. So we moved to Paris, and Paris is a land of sexually anything goes, and I didn't know that at the time. So. He quickly started traveling. I was alone with the kids pretty much all the time. Rarely saw him. He would come home on the weekends. He would be there to do his laundry, or to have me do his laundry, and then he'd quickly leave and go away. And this pattern went on and on and on. And 4 years after living in Paris, I said, it's time for me to come home. I don't want to be stuck here any longer with no job. I was isolated. I didn't have a community. I had stopped going to any kind of a church, and had actually started, just before we left, started BSF at a American church in the middle of Paris, and just kind of got intrigued by that because I started learning about a different God than I grew up with, being Catholic, and had gone to Catholic school. So, I mean, I really got kind of a different...
You were inundated?
I was totally kind of immersed in that belief system. And so the whole time I was in Paris and living with my husband when he was there, I never stopped clinging to my rosary at night, just kind of saying prayers in a one-off and a one-on. And... kind of a way, but never really had a relationship, sort of just, and over time became kind of angry at God for the circumstances. So I blamed God for what was going on in my life. And, but BSF kind of changed that, started chipping away just a little bit at that. And I got really curious about, well, this is a really interesting God. I mean, didn't know that before. And that happened really within, I think, 4 months of moving back to the United States. And so we moved back, landed really in just before 9/11. And on 9/11, I went to my very first Bible study. And it was just an incredible study about the person of Jesus Christ. And within, I would say, 30 days of that, many things happened in my life. Number one, God provided a job, again, at a very big company with making more money than I had ever thought possible. Provided, me a way to say there's a possibility here that I might be okay on my own, but still did not give myself the permission to do that. Shortly, again, within that 30 days, I was inundated with what I believe are revelations from the Lord, because I accepted Christ the day that I went to my Bible study on 9/11/2001, and so the revelations included just many women from all over the world, United States, United Kingdom, Europe, Asia, I mean, you name it. There were women that were coming out of the woodwork through phone calls that I received, emails that came in, and he was out of town when all of this happened. It happened within the span of really about a week. And the kids had actually discovered some kind of a stash of material that he had kept when a ping pong ball had actually gone up above cabinets in our basement, and they were playing ping pong. So they brought to me, after they read, many letters from many women, a lot of pornographic material, very dark types of pornography, and just a ton of evidence that not only was he still addicted to pornography, which he had always been addicted to, but he had escalated into serial affairs, prostitution, that kind of a thing. So I called my pastor at my church, and here I am, 30 days, a believer, and I said, this is going on, and I don't know what to do. And he referred me to a Christian therapist that was affiliated with that church. And I sat with that Christian therapist and was told that I needed to make better meals, have better sex, understand how to, meet the needs of my husband, that I was doing something wrong, that it was...
So blame shifted totally on you.
Yeah, all of it.
And
100%.
you all along, it sounds like, had already been feeling that, because you use phrases like, if I could just do this, if I could just do this. And now here's the therapist confirming the whole thing.
Exactly.
What did that feel like?
Yeah, it was horrible. I mean, I felt absolutely, I mean, I had suicidal thoughts. I thought, why am I living? I mean, I don't know what else to do. I mean, I really felt like I was at my wit's end. And I probably saw her for, I would say, a good 6 months to a year, if I remember. And one of my dreams at the time was, I want to be a therapist. Like, I want to do this. And I've always wanted to be a therapist, but never had the ability to do that because I didn't have the support to go to school. But and my businesses that I worked for would only pay for business degrees. But anyway, I digress. And so after about a year of trying more things, my husband at the time just wasn't changing, and he continued to be gone, continued to travel, and the acting out continued. And so I actually met with my pastor, and my pastor was pretty decent about it at the time. He enlightened me about the Word of God and said, you don't need to take this. I mean, you have a right to you have a right to do something else about this. And so it still, from that point on, it took me probably 4 or 5 years to actually make the decision to divorce. So, but what I find as what I found was that it was fairly good counsel, biblical counsel, but not necessarily with the full sort of permission to do it, because there was a big incongruence between the therapist that he had sent me to and what he was telling me that continued to really keep me stuck. And so I finally did pull the trigger. I got divorced. I stopped seeing that therapist. I married on the rebound. Really, within the first 30 days, I decided I was going to date 30 guys in 30 days, and I was going to find a Christian husband, and I did. So I dated a guy for about 3 years who presented to me, he was an elder of a church. He carried a Bible. He quoted scripture. He had 3 kids. He told me his wife had an affair. That's why they were divorced. Checked all the boxes. Everything was great. We got married 3 years later. And I ended that marriage after about 6 months. He moved out, and it took another 6 months to make the divorce final. But I essentially married the same person all over again. But this one seemed to be, again, a box checker, right? So he had all the credentials needed to be a faithful Christian husband. And turned out that he was still married at the time that we were dating. He lied to me about that, was still seeing his ex-wife, was still very involved with her, and also had a thing for massage parlor sex. And I wasn't aware of that. And I found out in hindsight that his family knew about it, didn't share that with me. His father is an elder in a church as well. And we had a lot of talks about his character and what should I know about this person. Oh, he's great. You're going to love him. There's nothing, and they still had pictures of the ex-wife all over the house, which was also kind of weird. But nobody ever really told me the truth. And there were plenty of people along the way that I was checking in with. But I don't blame them. I blame myself because I did not heal from the addiction and the abuse that brought. So in my second marriage, the abuse was physical. The abuse was spiritual. I was made fun of over my beliefs about the Word of God. The abuse was financial. The control over what I made, what he made, all was out of control. The abuse was emotional. Every kind of abuse that you can envision, sexual abuse as well, happened in that marriage. And abuse and addiction often go together, and most people don't realize that. So I had experienced years. I have a scar on my lip where I was hit, but a lot of the wounds didn't come from that are visible today. Most of them, obviously went away, and I healed from those.
So it'd be easy for someone that's listening right now to say, like, Lynda, what were you thinking? Why would you go through that so quickly again? But you just said something that was enlightening. Addiction, abuse go together. You talked about control earlier before we recorded this. Did you feel at that point that, is this part of the re-victimization process that happens to sexual abuse survivors?
Yeah, I think absolutely it's a part of it where you believe that you deserve it, right? You have no worth, you have no value. It's been whittled away, and that's what the abuse process does, is it takes away any kind of worth that you have, any kind of confidence that you have about who you are, and it just robs you of any of that.
And here's the thing I'll let you continue, but the thing that's scary about your story is elders, Bible-carrying churchmen.
Yes.
And we're going to do more of these podcasts with you, and at some point I need to get to this question. How do you know as a pastor? How do you know as a fellow elder?
Yeah.
How can you spot this? Because,
sure.
Like you said, these people are checking all the right boxes.
Right. I think the thing I would add to that is the church community as well. So I had the same advice from the community in my church as I did from the therapist. It's your fault. You have to be a better wife. You have to stop working. You have to do this. You have to do that. So I would add the whole church kind of comes together and doesn't understand this.
Well, that's terrible, unbiblical counsel. But
it
anyway, so.
It is. So that's why you stay, right? You say it's about me, it's about me, it's about me. There's something wrong with me, there's something wrong with me. And you think the quick fix after a divorce is let's just find somebody who's a better Christian.
Yeah.
Let's find somebody who believes in God.
So what happened next?
So after I ended the second marriage, I just said, I'm done. I'm not dating ever again. My kids came to me after that marriage. My kids were exposed to many things that I didn't know about until, there's still things that are coming out. They're 23 and 26 right now, and there are still things coming out about what's either happened to them or what they witnessed that they didn't share with me in both marriages, the second and the third. And so after that, I just said, I'm done, and I'm the common denominator here. It's time to stop blaming my husbands, my ex-husbands, it's time to start looking in the mirror and asking God, Lord, what is going on? I mean, I was still a baby Christian at the time. I knew a little bit, but I didn't know a lot. So I found a very, very good Christian, a biblical counselor, not somebody that I think we have a lot of Christian counselors that are not Christian counselors and are definitely not biblically aligned. And saw that person twice a week for 5 years, immersed myself in a program that really helped rewire my identity away from what other people think about me to who God says that I am, who he promises that I am through him. And I was baptized at the end of that process through immersion, which was a significant purifying event for me and really a sign that my heart had shifted and completely been changed by the Lord and just been, he's indwelling me. And so it was with purity that I accepted Christ at a different level at that point, because I understood him at that point in a completely different way than I had before.
So through all of that darkness and all that pain, which I'm sure is still real and it's still there always, but there is redemption.
There is redemption.
At the end of the road.
Yes, and I was redeemed, and I was shocked at, what happened next. So shortly after that, after I said I'm not dating anymore, one of the guys that I had dated in the 30 days after my 20-some year marriage, actually, we got in contact in only a way that God could have orchestrated. It's unexplainable. And he was the only person during the time that I was dating that many people who said, you're not dateable. You have nothing to offer. You're wounded. You need to not date and get help. And he walked away. And I had some very strong unchristian words for that. But we were both different people at that point and just started becoming friends. And we built our friendship on Jesus Christ and on the Bible. And we just talked about the Lord pretty much all the time. And that friendship became a romance. And 3.5 years later, we were married, which totally shocked me.
And you were dateable then?
I was dateable at that
Yes.
time. At that time, but that's after God had done his work in me and shifted my heart. That was a very long process for me.
And glory to God for that. That's
all the glory goes to God.
It's an amazing story. We're going to have you back, and we're going to talk a little bit about how that's fed now into your professional life. And you are a walking base of statistics, and so I'm going to poke around that a little bit, and I think we're going to open some eyes about what's really going on in churches. But the goal isn't to impugn churches. The goal is to help us all understand how to identify, how to biblically deal with these issues that get so easily hidden within communities of Christians. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it so much.
Thanks for having me.